Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Do you want to take a moment to just introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Sarah Williamson. I'm based in the UK, just outside of London, and I work as a life coach with a particular interest around alcohol and substance use and misuse.
Incredible. Okay. So, as you know, we're here to talk about healing and your own journey on this amazing spectrum that it takes to heal. So I want you to take me back to the start of your journey. And what was the moment that you realized that you needed to heal?
Mm, I think I can identify the moment now, but if you'd have asked me a question like that around the time it was happening, I would not have been able to say to you then, right, I'm at the start of something now, or this is a line that is drawn in the sand. I would probably mark it out somewhere as late as 2017, with really getting my ball rolling. Up until then, I don't think that I really could have had a conversation with you about healing as such. I don't think my head had been turned in that direction. I don't think it was something that I really had given any thought to. I probably would have told you throughout my 20s and 30s that what I was doing was cracking on with my life in the best way that I knew how. I was paying attention probably quite carefully at some times and ignoring stuff completely at other times. I was probably giving different amounts of energy to different areas of my life, perhaps, career wise, family wise, relationship wise at different times. But yeah, I would say to you that with some sort of um, real desire to change, it would have been sometime around 2017.
Okay, and what happened in that year to make you suddenly realize that something had to change?
I had a big realization in the middle of that year that there were some things in my life that I really did want to be different. I had that really uncomfortable realization that if I wanted things to be different, I was going to have to start doing some things differently if I wanted a change in my result. I had a particular hangover in 2017. I can tell you the date. It was the 17th of June. And, up until that point, I'd had various hangovers in my life before, but this particular hangover was probably more one of those existential crisis type hangovers where I really did wake up the next morning. And of course, I'd woken up previously and thought, oh, I feel terrible, and the massive, physicality of a hangover and also the emotional distress that it can bring. But this particular one was the one where I thought, I just don't want this kind of occurrence in my life anymore. I had had an amazing night out the night before, been up to London, met two of my oldest best friends. The three of us had been for cocktails, dinner, had an incredible night out. I haven't got you a hideous story that I can tell you about losing my mobile phone or, losing my job or blowing up my relationship or anything like that. Just a really bad hangover the next morning where I thought, hang on a second, this
Mm.
way of operating just isn't working for me anymore. And it's not even as if I had a hangover like that on a regular basis, that was just one of those occasions. And it really brought into sharp focus on that day that I was going to have to make some changes. I didn't quite know how I was going to do it, but I would very much say to you that in the following 6 months, I then started to resource myself with
Mm.
tools that I needed, looking at other people who were doing inspirational things, questioning what were other people doing, who were the people in my life who I could really consider to be. I don't know that I probably would have used the word role model at that time, but certainly people who I was looking at and thinking, oh, I wonder how they are getting that kind of result. What's going on for them? So I certainly started reading a lot more non-fiction at that point, particularly spiritual growth, personal growth type books that I never had read before. And that is where sort of my eyes started to open, I suppose. And then that has had different looks over the last few years. So at some times in that point, it has been perhaps more concentrating on physical change, at other points more emotional change, and at other points more spiritual change. And I suppose in that I would say to you, it definitely hasn't been a linear journey. It definitely hasn't felt like one step in front of the other.
Yeah, no, I absolutely hear that when it comes to a healing journey. And actually, I love the fact that there isn't some huge thing that started your journey. Because I think a lot of people have that misconception that healing can only come after something huge, like something massively life altering. And yes, it absolutely, that can be the starting point, 100%, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that idea of just actually you getting to the point where you realize this is just not what I want and I want something different. And I love when you said, I realized that if I wanted something different, I had to do something different.
Yeah.
Because isn't that just what healing is about? Like, you have to fundamentally change who you are in order to get a different outcome. So I think that that's so incredible. And actually, how did other people respond to your healing journey? Like, I know from you, Sarah's got a book. If anyone doesn't know, I'll let Sarah tell you about her book a little bit later. But from your own journey, like stopping drinking and sort of really kind of altering the way that you were doing life, like what was the kind of knock-on effect of people around you when you made those decisions?
Mm. Um, Choosing to stop drinking happened in 2019, although I had been turning it over in my head for 2.5 years up until, the point I was ready to kind of give that a go. Um, it was met with really well, if it was a movie, I'd tell you it was met with mixed reviews. um, it I had some friends where it almost just wasn't even a thing worth me mentioning because perhaps our friendship was based on dog walks together, coffee dates, activities that always had involved conversations, out in the fresh air and perhaps, I don't know, a shared time of our life that had been perhaps something to do with our kids crossing paths or something of that nature. I lost one really good friend in that time period where I was choosing to initially cut down my drinking quite significantly, and it became apparent through that time that really a lot of what our relationship was based upon was drinking together. And I tried a couple of different ways to, I suppose, redefine the parameters of our relationship, and I tried over a time period, to do that thing of, saying that what I was doing was, for me and about me, but that I cared very much about our friendship, doing that thing of saying, should we go to a yoga class together? Shall we, go out for, brunch together, whatever, choosing different things. And actually, she was just not up for those activities. And so whilst it hurt a bit, it did smart at the time, because I did feel that particular friendship slipping away from me. I sort of tried to hang on to it because we'd had, a long and shared and great history together. So that was a real disappointment to lose. Work was an interesting one at the time. So I, at that point, worked in local government. I'd spent nearly 12 years working in youth offending, youth justice. A huge part of my role had been about speaking to young people about their substance use and misuse, whilst never ever considering my own, because of course, I was talking to young people, but perhaps about their drinking, but more likely about their illegal drug use and the situations that they had got themselves into, perhaps the crimes that they had been accused of. And I had that thought in my mind. Well, to start with, I had zero thought in my mind, but at some point I had a thought in my mind about the difference being illegal drinks that are bought on the street versus alcohol which is sold on the shelf in the supermarket. And both of these substances are toxic. Both of them, cause cancer, and, I'll just say that as a top line. So many other different things we could talk about if we were going to go down that route. But me always being able to justify my drinking because there it was available on the shelf in the supermarket and didn't require me to do anything illicit or illegal to get hold of it. And so I'd be talking to young people about, what was happening for them as far as their drug use was concerned. And at some point, I started to connect these dots around the idea when I was getting home from work and dealing with, a lot of stress during my day. It was a very high pressure job, young people working on really long court orders. I had all sorts of moral questions that were starting to come up for me about the way that we treat young people in systems like that were starting to feel very uncomfortable. And I would get home from work and I would start to get ready to cook dinner and I would pour myself a glass of wine or a G&T. And some would say, well, nothing to see here, that's a completely normal way of living your life. But the dots I was joining were around the idea that what I was trying to do in that moment of time was take the edge off my day. What I was trying to do in that moment of time was numb out a bit, was zone out a bit, was to stop overthinking the stuff that felt like it was heavy. I was trying to change gear. I was trying to go from out of work day into evening time. And so partly it was habit, and by the time I stopped drinking, I was actually drinking well under the government guidelines for safe drinking. I was very rare. I kind of went through a long period where I might only have drunk once or twice a week. I might have drunk on a Friday night if I was going out with my girlfriends. By the end of my drinking, I might only have been drinking 2 glasses of wine on a night out. And so that thing of talking to people then in the workplace and kind of, I suppose, sounding out people and saying, isn't it so interesting how we talk to young people about what they are doing with their physical and emotional health? But actually, one of my colleagues was a massive rugby player, so he was always in on a Monday with a huge hangover. And, it just felt, I suppose, a disconnect. And where we'd have a big staff party, and of course it's entirely focused around how much you could drink at a Christmas do and whatever. And so that was something that I was starting to untangle a bit. And then as well, other friends, things just feel so much better now. So the majority of my girlfriends that live locally over the last few years, we've kind of switched from those big nights out. And actually, what we tend to do is put dates in the diary for a really long hike. You know, we'll get a train to another part of the countryside, different side of the county, and walk back together, or we go on big hill walks together. And actually, I would say to you that that hasn't particularly been driven by me saying, I don't want to go out on a bender. It's been more of a group think type process over time that just so happens to suit me really beautifully, because I wouldn't choose those kind of big nights out that we used to have. One of my closest and oldest friendships is still a little bit, I don't know, what would I say? A little bit wobbly. And that is, I think, and clearly, you know, you get my side of the story here. I think that for the pair of us, my decision to stop drinking has perhaps shone a light in a bit of a place that she didn't want a light shone. And so, even though I have been 4.5 years without having a drink at this point, she will still say to me, tell me again why you felt the need to do this. Or she'll say to me, I just don't understand. You know, you're no worse than the rest of us. I just don't know why you have to be so extreme. Why can't you just have a couple of glasses of fizz at our Christmas party? So I think our relationship will make it out the other side. But within my life, I suppose what I would sum up saying is that different relationships in my life have felt different since making this kind of decision. Some of them absolutely for the better and more joyful, and some of them have changed in other ways as well.
Absolutely. And I think like when you go on a healing journey, you have to change as a person. Like, you know, there isn't a version where you can heal a whole bunch of things and change the way that you think about things and not fundamentally change who you are. So it will always have an impact on the relationships around you. But that impact, you know, it won't always be negative. But as you have quite nicely put, it won't always be 100% positive either. It kind of comes with the territory, doesn't it, of going through. And the more that you align yourself with who you want to be, the more your groups of people will, you know, either stay or leave as you kind of go through that, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So, when you were going through this healing journey, you've said already that, you know, 2017 to 2019, before you kind of made the decision to stop drinking, like that's quite a fair amount of time to ponder
Mm.
the idea, which I think is quite cool. Um, were there any like moments along the way where it just felt too hard, or
Mm.
even after you stopped drinking, where, you know, you just thought you couldn't make it, or you just couldn't be this person anymore, or kind of go on this journey anymore?
Mm. Um, there weren't after I got going, because what I had done in the first place was say, I'm going to give myself a break from alcohol for a year as a bit of an experiment to actually see what physical, emotional, and spiritual differences it makes. If it makes no difference, after a year, I'm just going to go back to how I was before. I'm just going to go back and I'll have a couple of glasses of wine on a Friday night if I fancy it. I might choose just to only ever have a, I don't know, glass of fizz at a wedding or whatever. I'm just going to see what a year brings me. So I actually went into it having given myself a deadline of a year. And of course, actually, once I was getting towards the end of the year, I was feeling so much better in so many different ways and had made some really enormous changes that by then I was really happy to, I suppose, I was going to say stop the experiment in as much as stop telling myself this only had to be for a year. I was perfectly happy to go on with it. But what I had done, which I didn't realize at the time, is I had given myself the gift beforehand of putting everything, all the foundation stones in place that I really needed. So I had allowed myself to get really cross with myself, to be frustrated about the behaviours that I was caught up in, that I had given closer examination to the thoughts that I was thinking, the beliefs that I held on to really try and establish what I did hold as valuable. You know, really, this thing that I said that I valued, do I really? Is that actually the truth of me? Is it something different? So I think in that long run up period, what I was doing was educating myself, was finding out about myself, was to a certain extent test driving what I might be about to do, seeing which bits were okay to press the accelerator on and which bits I was going to give a wide steer away for the time being. And I think a part of what I did in that time period was start to gather around myself a bit of a new tribe. So I had not been on social, I wasn't on social media before 2019. And actually that was a very real and conscious decision, you know, working in local government, working with young people, you know, I suppose there's a way to be online and for somebody not to find out who you are, but I'd always kind of quite closely guarded my online footprint. So as I knew that I was going to be able to take a redundancy package at some point in the not too distant future from then, I started to kind of venture online and I suppose look for, maybe not even consciously look for, but start to see people who crossed my path who giving me felt like I was getting nudges in a particular direction, started to follow, I suppose, what I might describe as a bit of a golden thread and, you know, pull through on things that did feel good, allow myself to put down things that didn't, to be open-minded about modalities and just things I'd never been exposed to before or never exposed myself to before. And so that idea of there being a moment in which there was a huge realization, I suppose I'd describe it more as a beautiful opportunity to have lots of little light bulbs going off at different times, which at times has felt delightful and joyful, and at other times really confronting and horrible. Sorry, am I supposed to be completely honest?
Yes, 100% honest is what we're going for. And I think like it's so important though to be honest because so many people in the online space push healing as like, oh yeah, just like come on a retreat and suddenly within 3 days everything will be different and your life will be changed. And actually, like the last person I spoke to when we were doing recordings, literally like a 10-year journey. You've said like, 2017, we've got, the kind of start of this. My journey started at a very similar time to yours, around that kind of 2017 mark. And it's not a year or a 6 month or, a really kind of quick thing. It's it's a proper like commitment to go on and find out who you are and what you want the world to look like. And I think one of the big things that really struck me, you said earlier around like you have to go through the process of re-looking at your beliefs and like changing what you believed and like thinking like, do I actually believe that to be true? So what was like the biggest outlook shift do you think that you had?
um, I think it was probably around a softening and a general gentlingness, not a word, of myself, that I'd actually had periods of my life where I had, so not in that most recent job, but in roles before that where I'd had to be really quite hard nosed, maybe even a little bit ruthless, maybe even I worked a job in central London in my 20s, where I was head of a massive visitor services and security team. I am 5 foot nothing. And Trafalgar Square was my kind of, the centre of the front of the building that I worked in, and the epicenter of what I did. Now, the people who stood just behind me were all 6 foot something tall and wide. And I was very definitely employed for my mouth rather than my huge physical features. But yeah, I definitely led the early part of my career in quite an energy of push and strive, and maybe not quite struggle, but certainly something edgy and quite hard. And recognizing that actually a really nice thing was to soften the edges, that the idea that more than anything else now, I would tell you, the thing that is most important to me is kindness. I absolutely get so much from recognizing the kindness in other people. I love having the opportunity to be kind to people around me, and I suppose that has been something that's been a real pleasure to grow into and to take on, and recognize that as something that's so very important to me. I think that idea of how I might have heard or taken on that idea previously. People sometimes say to each other as a bit of an insult, "Oh my God, you've changed." And I would have taken that absolutely as an insult. And now I kind of think it's so interesting. We're human beings, aren't we supposed to change? If nothing else, we absolutely are not supposed to be who we were in our 20s or 30s when we're in our 40s. Yes, I have changed, absolutely. And what a joy it is to be able to say, I've changed and I'm all the happier for it. Isn't that such a privileged place to be in life, and to be so very aware of it? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, I completely agree with that idea of people saying you've changed and feeling really proud,
Yeah.
being like, oh, I'm glad you noticed.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
I've done a lot of work to get
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. This
So
was a
different.
labor of love. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, and for me as well, when because I lived in the UK for 15 years and then I moved back home to South Africa, and that moment of people almost realizing for the first time who I was after not living in the same place as a lot of my friends in my family, since I was like in school pretty much, like I finished school and college and then I left the country and then I came back, as an adult married, like running my own business, like in a completely different way. And it was so interesting to almost have people have to get reintroduced
Mm.
to who I was. So I completely get that idea of like the change that happens, and then you come out the other end and you are different, and it's such a good thing. It's such a good thing. So during this healing journey, you have obviously started a business,
Mhm.
as we know. You've written a book.
Mhm.
You run your own incredible podcast. Would you say that this journey was kind of what you needed to go on to sort of find this purpose? And
Yeah. Oh, that is such a good question. Oh, what I would say to you now, and I never could have said it to you then, is I really, really recognize that we teach what we most need to learn ourselves. And nobody would have been more surprised than me 5 years ago to be able to get a tiny glimpse into my life now and to say, what? What? She's written a book on the subject of what? What? It just can't even be possible. I I Yeah, no one is more surprised than past me to find myself right here. Um, I suppose in the run up to recognizing that my work was going to be restructured, we were going to be the way that our work was done was being remodeled for the sixth time in 12 years of working there. And I was really exhausted by that. I loved the time that I spent with my young people. I worked really lengthy court orders with them, got to know them really well, and recognised that with every restructure, what was happening was obviously human beings were the most expensive resource. There was less money, less hours, and more young people to work more hours with, and it was starting to feel less and less satisfying, I suppose. And so I had already done various different coaching qualifications. I was registered with as an addiction professional. I knew I was going to start setting up my own business. And so I had said to my line manager, this is what I'm doing, building on the side. And I had a really lovely year's overlap where I'd set up my business, which is called Drink Less, Live Better. And I was still able to carry on the work that I was doing in that job. And I went into specializing my coaching around alcohol specifically. I do work with people who use other substances, but mostly it is alcohol. And it is from that place of talking very little about addiction, very little about alcoholism, very little about how we have to identify ourselves in our past. And it is, we talk from time to time a bit about guilt and shame. My one-to-one clients, we very much do a certain amount of unpicking and looking at the past to be able to lay the solid foundations for the goals, the aspirations, the intentions for what's coming next. But I am very keen on building our future based upon who we are looking forward and excited to becoming. I had a really, really long held belief. It was almost a bit of a affirmation, a mantra that was really hardwired in my brain, that was around, and it probably ran on repeat for about 2.5 years, when I was doing that thing of deciding, first of all, I was going to cut down my drinking, then I was going to stop drinking. But I'll be lonely, miserable, and boring. And lonely, miserable, and boring were almost like it was my tagline running in the back of my mind. And do you know what? I am not in the market, for me or anybody around me, building a lonely, miserable, or boring life. That could not be further from my truth. And although I always say it, thank you very much, I'll be the judge of whether I'm lonely, miserable, or boring. I know actually that's not up to me, but I do not feel like I have signed up or subscribed to a life that is lonely, miserable, and boring from 2019 onwards. And that is part of the real joy. The people who circulate, who are around in my world, my one-to-one clients, it's something that we have a real laugh about, because you do have all of these hang-ups, all of these ideas, the way that alcohol is marketed, the way that society talks about alcohol, looks at alcohol, the very idea that it's your fault if you can't drink responsibly, or it's your fault if you can't drink in moderation, that it's your fault if you're ruining everybody else's good time by not having a drink. And so it's great to confidentially pick all of that stuff apart with somebody else. You can be in that really safe place to say the things that have really annoyed you, or you're trying to figure out so that you can move forward. And certainly writing a book was the place where I suppose in the first place, I viewed it as a bit of a holding bay, let's say. because I had all of these amazing resources that I was sharing with my clients, on a daily basis. I had some um, some tools, some models, things that I referred to really frequently, and I was kind of filing them in my computer in various different places. Resources for different things for different purposes, and then I kind of thought, oh, great, great, I'll make this into a resource that I can share with people. And then it kind of grew and got bigger, and definitely did not look like a 10-page PDF anymore. And then I thought, people so often ask me about my experiences, and in coaching, obviously that is entirely about my client. I'm not going to sit and tell a client my stories in their time, but it felt like a really good place to tuck some of the tales, to put some of the lived experience, to put a bit of a mentor's cap on and say, this is how it felt for me, and these are the different ways in which it might feel for you. So the book is quite structured in as much as it sort of in the beginning very much talks about how we might get to the place where we recognize that alcohol might not be doing us quite the favors that we thought it was previously, how we get ready to frame a change, what's the education we need, what do we need to know, how we then actually do the change, and of course on the end of that, what do we do once we've done the change? So guess what, we've given ourselves that break, or we've moderated, we've cut down our drinking significantly, whatever your end goal is. So where do we find our place of joy? Where do we find the personal growth that we're interested in? How do we then start to make sense of the stuff that had gone before? Where are the places that we can find total contentment? Where do we just find our bit of peace? Where is the place that we feel? I do talk about feeling joyful and happy and stuff, and I also recognize that actually those feelings are really quite elevated. They're quite big and high feelings. And for me, I actually recognize that I'm really comfortable in that space of fine, okay, good enough, middling, and enjoy the physical kind of safety around those feelings. So it's the book is a way of offering out different ways of looking at the angles at which you might be coming at this from, and it very definitely is not written as a prescriptive text. It is not a start to A, follow through to Z, do this work in this order. It Looking back on it now, I would say to you that it's probably really quite a neat record of my healing journey, being in a place of I'm not going to be able to say to somebody, oh yes, take all of my brilliant experience because I'm 20 years sober now. I'm only just in front of the next person that's making that change, and that feels really, I think that feels reassuring, safe. It feels nice being in that position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, I absolutely adore that. I am definitely going to put a link to your book below. So anybody who does want to have a little look at it can go and get involved, because it is an incredible read for people to go, especially if they're wanting to start this kind of um substance journey, definitely. So what would your advice be for somebody who, regardless of the reason that they're starting, but is kind of sitting in that messy, just about to start healing, has made the realization something has to change? What would your advice be as like a starting point to get moving?
Yeah. Oh, you saying that word messy has just reminded me of a particular moment. I had a bit in my life at a particular point, and I've had bits like it since. But you saying the word messy reminded me that I had this particular period that I used to call the messy middle bit. And I also refer to it as the liminal space, that bit in which you're moving away from who you were before, and you're definitely not who you are going to be next. And everything feels a little bit ugly, sorry. And everything
Mhm.
feels, examples of the messy middle, the liminal space would be, I don't know, airside at an airport where you can't go back and you've come through, but you're not on the next bit. It would be
Mhm.
a caterpillar's chrysalis where you haven't yet turned into a butterfly. It would be a lift or an elevator in between floors of a building. So you're in this place of change happening. And I would say when I was in that messy middle bit before I had got to my being ready to start changing, the thing that I might have liked to have received as guidance or support is around the idea that if something keeps on occurring to you, it probably is worth getting a bit closer to it instead of keep backing off. And I definitely recognize that I could see there was something ahead that I wanted to do, and there were, hurdles or obstacles, or and by that I do mean, beliefs. I mean roadblocks in my head, not physical roadblocks that needed assessing, and they couldn't just be plowed through. They required really careful disassembling or careful navigation around. And so I suppose I would say to somebody at the moment who is in that place of recognizing change is coming, to go a little bit gently on yourself, to find that place that you can say, okay, it's all right. I see the stuff that is coming, and what do I need? Whose hand do I need to hold? What resource do I need? What rest do I need? Where am I able to give myself the best possible chance to do this thing in the way that feels right for me, in a way that isn't prescriptive or that then feels too difficult to carry on with?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that that is such a key thing in that it is already hard, so don't make it harder for yourself. Like, actually being kind to yourself is such an incredible skill to learn as you're going through a healing journey. Because I think the first time you do it, you're not good at that yet, and it's really hard. And then every time you kind of heal, because as we know, it is not a linear journey, it just gets easier and easier every single time because you've gotten better at the actual skill of healing rather than, not knowing how to do it and where to go. So I think that that's so incredible. And on this idea that, healing is not linear and we're continuously working on ourselves and continuously figuring out life. What's your next healing? What's the work you're doing now to kind of progress to the next level, do you think?
Yeah, I I am just on the back of about, I'm going to say, I think about a 6 week, um, rather, I'm going to use this word, fallow period, where I just kind of slid into a place of some kind of, maybe static place is the right word, from a professional point of view. I just took the opportunity to take my foot off the gas a little bit. There was some stuff going on in my personal life that needed time, attention, care, and I needed actually to rest. And
Mm,
I think for so many of us, we have internalized the idea that to be valuable human beings, we must be productive, and to be, in the game of life, we need to be. There need to be outcomes. We need to be able to say what we did at the end of the day, and what we achieved, and what's been shifted off our to-do list. And so right now, I'm just building back into having given myself that opportunity to be a little bit more still and careful. So I think my next bit of healing is around some of the professional stuff that I've got coming up. I have worked a lot, well, in previous work, but also now with and around people's trauma. And more than being, one of the things that's a bit of a, I suppose, buzzword at the moment is around, coaches being trauma informed, which I would say is all well and good. The more people that are, the better. But a step more than that is to be trauma responsive, to recognize, how carefully we handle other people. People trust us to with their biggest stuff. And so from a professional point of view, my next bit of healing is around that, actually, and is around, where we can go deeper and get to the places that ultimately will bring a lot more freedom on the other side of them, but how we navigate through all of that stuff. So yeah, that's my professional next bit of healing. And I suppose personally, if I were to separate them out, I think I've got and of course this sounds like a cliche, and of course it's a cliche because it's true, but probably some family stuff to have a bit of a think about as part of my next steps.
That is incredible. I think it's so wonderful actually to split your healing out into multiple areas, because it's not just one thing. There is so many different things that we can heal with. And actually to have that, professionally, I'm going to be doing this, but from a family point of view, I'm going to be focusing on something different. And it really kind of gives you that ability to also not just lump your whole healing journey into one massive thing that feels really uncomfortable and really huge. So I think, yeah, that is such an incredible thing. And I completely agree with you around that trauma responsive way of approaching things. I think as coaches in the world today, regardless of what you're helping somebody with, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it's addiction, like there is such a need, because so many people are going on this journey of realizing that they want to do something different, and realizing that they have, that they even have trauma and that they need to do something with it. So I think that is, it's such an incredible thing. And honestly, it's been so wonderful having this conversation with you and just hearing this whole journey that you've gone through. And, it doesn't have to be a big explosive start, but actually it can still be such an incredible journey that you go on, with such a life altering for you and so many other people, by you kind of making this decision and putting the dots together that kind of started this. So like, just thank you for being part of the collective of women that are doing something different in the world. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been such a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Diary of Discovery.